I'm Dr. Elizabeth Kincaid. I'm the director of the Institute for Faith and Learning, and we are part of a team who have worked together to bring this event to Baylor. So I want to thank our partners before I introduce our speakers and give you all a little bit of instructions about how the evening is going to go. So first, this event is hosted by a lot of partners from across the Baylor campus. Institute for Faith and Learning is one of the sponsors. We also have sponsors from the Honors College, which I believe this is one of our Honors College formation lectures, so thank you, Dean Henry, and the Honors College for your support. Truett Theological Seminary, which is letting us use this beautiful space. The Student Life, as well as particularly the Leadership for the Common Good Initiative in Student Life, a great partner for us. And the Provost Office. This event is actually, it was scheduled before we knew when Civil Discourse was, and in God's providence, this is the Civil Discourse Week here at Baylor, where we explore and learn about how to better have conversations across divisions and how to exemplify Christian reconciliation. And I really couldn't think of a better event to kick off Civil Discourse Week than having Barb and Ben here to share with us tonight. So this is an event from across the Baylor campus. And I know people are here with different groups, so some of you need to scan things. I will tell you when you can scan things. So we're going to have about an hour of conversation. After that, we will have an opportunity for Q&A. We will move a mic to the middle so you can come up, ask questions of our speakers, and as we do at all academic events, let me remind you, please ask a question, not make a statement. And remember that this is an event that is supposed to be exemplifying civil discourse on the Baylor campus. We will have questions for a while, and at the end, we will have 2 QR codes. If you are here for your honors formation credit, that code will come first, so make sure you scan that. After that, we have a second QR code, which is part of our participation in Civil Discourse Week, and we hope that everyone will scan that code so we can learn here at Baylor and in the Provost Office, what are we doing that helps people think in different ways about civil discourse? So we appreciate your feedback and your engagement with that. So those will be the 2 QR codes at the end. Please stick around for the Civil Discourse PR code. And having provided all of these announcements, I'm now really excited to welcome up our speakers. Our moderator tonight is going to be someone known and loved across the Baylor campus, Dr. Thomas Hibbs, professor of philosophy and dean emeritus of the Honors College, who actually helped bring this group here. And he's going to start out the evening by interviewing Ben Spencer and Barbara Bradley Hagerty, and then with a special guest who he will be introducing at the end. So if y'all three want to come on up.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thanks to the Honors College and Institute of Faith and Learning for sponsoring this event. We were offered in our Baylor summer program in DC last summer an opportunity to co-sponsor an event featuring Barb and Ben. And at the end of that, I reached out to a number of folks at Baylor and said, we have to bring this conversation to Baylor. As you probably already are aware, there's a remarkable story here. And in fact, what's even more remarkable is it's a series of remarkable stories within remarkable stories, each of which is challenging but deeply hopeful in the end. And I think this conversation, of all the ones that I see listed for this week, is one that I find enormously inspiring, precisely for giving us hope as Christian believers. And so I'm delighted to be able to just ask some questions and let Barb and Ben will also have slides that give you a sense of all of the events. Barb, let's start out with you. You did a lot of research once you found out about the case. How did you initially become connected to Ben and his case?
Can everyone hear me? Is it on?
Testing 1, 2. Yes.
There we go.
There we go. We radio reporters love our microphones. Thank you for inviting me. This is great, inviting both of us. In spring of 2017, I was looking for a story to write for The Atlantic magazine, where I'm a contributing writer. I had spent 19 years at NPR, and one of my favorite sources was a guy named Jim McCluskey, who started the first organization to reinvestigate dubious convictions. It's called Centurion Ministries. And Jim was he was fantastic, a wonderful source. And so I called him up and I said, Jim, you've gotten about 65 people either off death row or off of life sentences. What's the case that haunts you? What's the case that keeps you up at night? He said, oh, that's easy. Ben Spencer's case. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about Ben. So then he told me Ben's story, and I'm just going to very briefly tell you what happened to launch us. On March 22nd, 1987, this being the 23rd, March 22nd, 1987, a man named Jeffrey Young, 33 years old, 3 children, 12 and under, married his high school sweetheart. He was working late on a Sunday night in the Warehouse district of Dallas. We don't know what happened because there are no security cameras or no iPhones, obviously, but he came out of his office around 9 or 9:30 at night, and police believe that 2 men were waiting for him, and they stole his watch, his wedding ring, his cash. They hit him over the head. They cracked his skull in 5 places. They carried him outside, put him in the trunk of his car, his BMW. They drove over Trinity River and turned left into West Dallas, which is a poor neighborhood. Somehow Jeffrey Young managed to get out of the trunk of the car, and he fell onto Puget Street. And the 2 men, we think, looked in the back in the rearview mirror, saw that the victim was lying on the ground, and people beginning to gather around. And so they parked the car and they ran away. The police couldn't find the culprit right away. I mean, I should say that at 3:05 on that morning, the morning of the 23rd, Jeffrey Young died. So suddenly the robbery investigation became a murder investigation. And they ended up arresting Ben Spencer. Ben was 22 years old. He was newly married, a baby on the way, and there was nothing to connect him to the crime. No fingerprints, no bloody clothing, no murder weapon, none of the jewelry or anything, no cash, nothing to connect him to the crime, except for 3 neighbors who said that they saw him running away from the car in order to get, it turned out, a $25,000 reward, and 1 jailhouse informant who said that Ben confessed to him. It was wildly erroneous, but said that Ben confessed to him. He was facing 25 years in prison. He ended up walking out 2 months after Ben was convicted. So at any rate, what happened, I'll be very, sorry, let me reel this thing in. Let me land this bird, okay? What happened is that Ben was convicted, given life in prison. Jim McCluskey heard about the case, took him a while to get around to it because it had so many demands, but dug up enough evidence to convince a Dallas judge that Ben was innocent. In Texas, a judge can't just release someone based on innocence. They have to get approval from the Court of Criminal Appeals. And the Court of Criminal Appeals looked at it, took their time, and in 2011, they said, sorry, Ben, no DNA evidence. Sorry, we're just not convinced. You're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. My view was, if a judge saying that someone is innocent isn't good enough to get at least a hearing to get this person out, what good is innocence? What good is justice? What does this say about our system? And that's what got me going on this story.
Thank you. Let's go back, Ben, to your experience in March of 1987. You were newly married to Deborah. The 2 of you were expecting a baby. And then on March 26th, you were home, not feeling well, heard a knock on the door, and what happened?
When I proceeded to the door, I could see out the front window that there were police cars out front. And so I opened the door, and there was a detective, excuse me, and a uniformed police officer on the porch. And when I opened the door, he asked me, did I have any ID? I pulled my ID out, handed it to him. He told me to turn around, put my hands on the wall, that I was going to be placed under arrest. And I asked him whatever for, because I hadn't done anything. I didn't have any outstanding tickets, had no warrants. And so he said, well, I'll tell you in a minute. So from that, he put handcuffs on me, took me out to his car, put me in the back seat of the car, walked around the car, got in the driver's side, looked over the back seat of the car, and he said, you know about the white guy they found on the street the other day? I said, yeah, I heard that they found somebody on the street the other day. He said, well, that's what you're under arrest for, his murder. I said, you got the wrong guy. That's not me. I had nothing to do with that. He said, well, some of your neighbors claim to have saw you on the night of the offense, walking around showing off a jam box with a TV on it. And I said, well, that's not true. I said, I didn't walk around with any jam box. I don't have a need for a jam box. I have 2 cars. Both my cars have a system in the house. What I'm going to do with a jam box? He said, I don't know. That's what your neighbor said. And that's where my story began. I found myself in the county jail being questioned about a murder I had no idea about. And the rest, I was later convicted.
March 26, 1987, you never walked out of, you went for an interview, and you didn't get out till 2021.
2021.
Can you imagine?
So what was your initial experience like? You were trusting in the system, and yet you were convicted. What was the experience like for you in jail?
Well, it was hard because I was there for something that I did not do. But I believed in the system. I believed that the system would work. In fact, I just knew once I wasn't released, before I went to trial, I just knew once the evidence was presented at trial, I'd be found not guilty. That was not the case. I was convicted first of murder and sentenced to 35 years, non-aggravated, which means I would have did maybe 5 years at the most and been eligible for parole. But it was found that one of the witnesses had lied about the reward money, and so I was granted a new trial. And in the new trial, I saw it as an opportunity, again, to prove my innocence, something that a person is not responsible for doing that's accused. The state has the obligation to prove your guilt. And so, again, I thought that I would be found not guilty, but the second time I was convicted again, and this time sentenced to life in prison.
So we're going to go through the whole history of this, but maybe back up for 1 second, Barb, because you've covered cases like this. How common is, you mentioned your colleague whom you work with on cases like this. How common is this sort of conviction?
Yeah. So this happens all the time. If you go on a website called the National Registry of Exonerations, you'll find that there have been more than 3,800 exonerations since 1989. And these are the ones that we know about. And they involve the same sort of elements, a few more different elements than what we've seen in Ben's case. But if I can just tick through what went on in Ben's case. So you've got incentivized witnesses who wanted the $25,000. You've got jailhouse informants, and they are key. They're pivotal, because in Ben's case, no one saw the assault. It was only the jailhouse informant who said, oh yeah, Ben confessed to me about the assault. That's how they got him. It could have been, anyone driving around the BMW, but no. So you had the jailhouse informant, and they are critical to especially the weakest cases. That's one of the disturbing things. You had police that had what's called tunnel vision. So one example of that is that tunnel vision is when a police officer believes so much that one person is guilty that they don't investigate alternative suspects. And so in the case of Ben Spencer, there were 2 people who went to the police, to the Detective Brasino, and they said to them separately, didn't know the other went, hey, you know what, you've got the wrong guy. We know who did this, a guy named Michael Hubbard. He told us about it. He described the assault. He said that they got Ben and this other guy, Robert Mitchell, for it. We know I mean, you've got the wrong guys. We know who did this. And do you know what they did with that information? Nothing. They didn't do anything with that. So then we have another element that's very common, which is prosecutorial misconduct. And in this case, what happened is there was a lot of pressure for them to solve this case. Understandably, every case should be solved, but there was a lot of pressure, and what the first prosecutor did in the first trial is he hid evidence that should have been given to the defense. And the evidence was that their star witness, Gladys Oliver, had received money in exchange for her testimony. That would have undercut her credibility. The jury needed to hear that evidence, but they didn't. The jury never had heard it. And the only reason there was a mistrial is because Ben's lawyer happened to, after they had sentenced Ben, and while they were considering after they had convicted Ben and they were considering his sentence, when the jury was out, Ben's lawyer looked at the table next to him, the prosecutor's table, and saw that there was a piece of paper that showed that the star witness had received money for her testimony. So he brought it to the court, and there was a mistrial. So what you see is that I'm not saying these are bad people. I'm saying that these are people who are pressured to solve cases, sometimes to cut corners. Sometimes they always believe that they've got the right person, or almost always. But stuff happens when you don't actually try to get at the truth, when that is not paramount, and that's what happens.
So that's one side, right? The prosecutors. The other side is the convicted person who's jailed. And what amazed me hearing you speak last summer, and I've got a couple quotes from things that I want to put these together. In 2005, you wrote to your wife, Deborah, and said, "Bitterness and hatred are like a cancer. They will eat away at you until they destroy. It's just like my accusers. I don't hold any ill feelings toward any of them. I hate the fact that they lied on me, but I don't hate any of them. What I want you to do for me is simple. Be at peace, because it is far more rewarding." 2 years later, the 20 years after you were convicted, you were up for parole for the first time, and you wrote to Deborah to say, "Don't get your hopes up." Why? Because to get parole, you would have had to have accepted responsibility for the crime, something you refused to do. And you wrote, "Truth has always meant more to me than my freedom." Can you tell us what gave you, in the face of not just false accusations, but a long sentence, this peace, and how you maintained this commitment to the truth over your own freedom and even reunion with your wife?
Throughout this ordeal, I began to develop a relationship that I always thought that I had, but soon realized I didn't have. And the relationship I'm referring to is my relationship with my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I began to learn things about my Savior that I thought I knew, and quickly realized I didn't quite understand. So I was beginning to develop a relationship with my Lord and Savior, that I was able to develop this peace within myself, to the point that I don't want to hate anybody, I don't want to dislike anybody, I just want to love people, because that's what I've been called to do as a Christian, as a believer. Christ said, you've heard that it's been said to love your neighbors, but I say unto you, love your enemies, do good to those who persecute you. So to me, that meant more to me than anything. And truth never changes. Facts remain the same. I couldn't for myself, despite the fact that I wanted to be free, just ignore the fact that the truth was there. So I wanted to hold on to the truth and not taint it by any means, just for my freedom. I mean, I didn't want to be in prison, but at the same time, I didn't want to lie just to get out. I mean, and especially after I had done so much time. I mean, if I was going to lie, I should have lied before I was convicted and just accepted, because I could have gotten in fact, I had 2 trials. I'm going to go back. We had 2 trials. And between the 2 trials, right before the second trial began, I was offered a 20-year plea bargain by the state. With a 20-year plea bargain, I could have did 2 years and been eligible for parole. So if I was going to lie, it would have been the best opportunity to lie and say that I did it. But no, I mean, the truth matters more than anything else to me. And so I just held to the truth.
If I could have one editorial comment for our students here. We read texts from Plato and Socrates to Martin Luther King Jr. Those words and this witness are right up there with Socrates' death, commitment to the truth, and Martin Luther King's love of enemies in the face of persecution and violence. It's just, it's such a remarkable witness, and thank you. Thank you for that. So we don't have time to go into all the details of what happened. You've already mentioned Barb Jim McCloskey, who helped you to find new evidence, to bring it for a judge for an evidentiary hearing. The judge ruled, as you've already gone over this, but let's go through it in a little more detail. The judge ruled Ben was innocent, but Texas High Court disagreed, and in 2011, the court, all elected former prosecutors, ruled that Ben would spend the rest of his life in prison. You got involved, Barb, in 2017, and you needed to try to find new evidence 30 years after a crime. How likely is that? How did you go about trying to do that?
You would actually be surprised at how easy it is to find evidence 30 years after the crime. It actually was pretty easy, because here's the thing. Time is the enemy of truth, right? In these cases, like witnesses die and memories fail and all sorts of stuff happens in time that make it harder to find the truth. But time is also truth's friend. And by that I mean people change. People get divorced. People stop being friends. People stop protecting their friends because they're no longer friends. Conscience eats away at your sleep. All this stuff can happen over years. And so what we found is that when you knock on the doors of people who have something to say, who said one thing, and you think they were lying, they are kind of unburdened. They're kind of relieved when you show up and ask them. And if I just can give 2 quick examples, if that's all right.
Please.
So there were 4 witnesses. 3 of them were neighbors. 2 of them, one of them was a jailhouse informant. So one of the witnesses was a guy named Jimmy Cotton. He was 17 at the time. His friend, who also testified that Ben was guilty, had been shot, killed, and the 3rd eyewitness wouldn't talk to us. But we managed, we meaning Daryl Parker and I. Daryl is a private investigator in Dallas who really followed Ben's case, had thought for years that Ben was innocent. Jim McCluskey put Daryl and me together, and the 2 of us went all over Dallas. And I have to tell you, I'm sorry to tell you this, Ben, but it was so much fun. Because we were going everywhere, all over Dallas, to the scariest parts, and trying to find witnesses, old witnesses, and find new ones. And so Daryl and I, he's at the crime scene there, Daryl and I ended up tracking down Jimmy Cotton. And it was a really rainy day, pouring rain, and he lived with his mother in what was kind of an apartment building that looked like a former motel, because there was like a roof over us, and the rain is cascading behind us. And we're sitting there, in front of the door, and I'll have to stand up for this. And so what happened is we're standing in front of the door, and Daryl is about to knock, and he's like this. And then he looks over at me, and he sees that, I'm actually right in front of the door. Daryl is just to the right of the door. And he looks at me, and he gently moves me over, and then moves to the other side of the door, and he goes, "Sometimes they shoot through the door." So we knock on the door, and we get, and it turned out Jimmy Cotton was there, and it was amazing how quickly, I basically I wanted to warm up and do this interview slowly. within a couple of minutes, he was like, I said, so Jimmy, I want to talk to you about Ben Spencer. And he goes, well, I don't know if I saw him. I don't know if it was him or not. It was dark. I never saw his face. He was running. And it's like, it was this confessional. He'd been waiting 30 years to get this off his chest. And he ended up taking a polygraph and signing an affidavit, and he was a key witness. The other one was a jailhouse informant. And we ended up finding him, Danny Edwards, reaching him through his fiancée, who told him to come and meet with us the next morning. And when we talked to him, Danny Edwards is there. He spent most of his life in prison. I'm like, Danny, did Ben really confess to you? He's like, no, he didn't confess to me. He said that they said he did it. He never said he did it. And what gives? He goes, well, this is the way the game is played in prison. This is how you get a shorter sentence. I lie on you, you lie on me, the best liar wins. And then, we're not allowed to swear here, right? Because I want to quote Danny, but I won't. I will do a variation. So then Daryl goes, so Danny goes, so how is Ben anyway? It's 30 years after the conviction. And I say, he's in prison, Danny. He's still in prison. It's this long pause. And then Daryl says, well, so how does that make you feel? Long pause. And he goes, like, shoot. That's the PBS version. And he ended up confessing it was all on tape, that Ben never did anything. So the point is, it's never too late to find the truth. The truth is sturdy, right? The truth doesn't go away. It's like what Ben is saying. The truth does not go away. And we found the truth, and we handed over everything to the district attorney, and away they went.
So finally, something went right for you. A new DA, elected in 2018, reopened the case, decided that you didn't get a fair trial. You were released then pending a new trial in 2021. What were you thinking and feeling at this point?
Well, I was excited because finding the truth was about to prevail, and I was about to be released. I was ecstatic.
So here's another really remarkable part of this story. In the 1990s, facing a life sentence, Ben asked his wife Deborah to divorce him so she could move on with her life and raise their child. On January 10th, 2022, they remarried on what would have been their 35th anniversary. Deborah is here today. I want you to stand up because Deborah, please stand up so we can recognize you. And we also have to recognize she's in appropriate Baylor Bear attire of green and gold. Thank you for that. She said she's been to Baylor with friends before. Glad to have you back and have you here with us. For Barb, Ben was exonerated by the district attorney on August 29th, 2024. You were there, and something stunning happened. Can you describe this scene?
A couple of stunning things happened. The place was completely full. It was a courtroom, the courtroom where he was convicted twice, actually, 283rd. The courtroom held 80 people. There were 150 in there. They were sitting in the jury box. They were sitting all over the place. The judge had to kick a bunch of them out. It was packed with Ben's supporters. We actually didn't know if Ben was going to be exonerated or just the charges dismissed without clearing his name. So everyone was kind of on pins and needles. And eventually the place quiets down and the prosecutor stands up and says that they're going to dismiss the charges based on innocence, which means that he was completely exonerated and his name would be cleared. And then Ben had a chance to stand up, and this is what Ben said.
And I'd ask that we don't forget that myself and my family, we're not the only victims in this, but the Young family were victims as well, because they lost a loved one, and the person who was actually responsible for what happened to Jeffrey Young was not brought to justice. So I'd ask that you pray for the Young family and be mindful of them in this manner, because they still lost a loved one. So I don't want them to be forgotten in this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So, one little postscript to this. Before the hearing, I was sitting crowded in this bench, and I got a text, and the text said, "I'm here." And I looked back, and I saw the oldest son of the victim, Jay Young, standing in the doorway in this sea of Ben supporters. Now, what I want you to know about the Young family is that at this particular, there are two sides. When a system gets it wrong, there are two sets of victims. One is obviously Ben and his family, but there is another set of victims, and that's the original victim and his family. And in an instant, what had happened is that the conviction, any closure that the Young family had was gone. The murderer, who knew who the murderer was? The case was, it was a cold case now. 37 years after his father was died, Jay Young's father's murder was unsolved. And for 30 years, they had been told again and again by the prosecutors that, no, we have the right person. Even as the media talked about it, even as all of this upheaval was going on, no, we have the right person. Just trust us. We have the right person. And now all of that was undone. And Jay Young came and sat in this sea of Ben Spencer supporters and watched Ben talk. And what I'd like to say is, right then, when Ben was talking, Ben had no idea that Jay was sitting there. And that's what he said, and that's what Jay heard.
Jay Young was 12 years old when his father was killed. He's with us here today. Jay, would you please come up and join us? Welcome to Baylor.
And actually, today is March 23rd, 2026. Jeffrey Young died at 3:05 on March 23rd, 1987, which was 39 years ago. So I would ask, do we give Jeffrey Young a moment of silence? Thank you.
Jay, thank you for being here. Jay has a daughter who's a freshman here at Baylor. He got to see her today. What had happened in your life that prompted you to come to this exoneration hearing of your father's alleged killer?
Testing. Well, first of all, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I need to turn this up. Hello.
There
Okay.
we go.
What prompted me? Well, what didn't happen in all those years that led up to that? Okay. I speak kind of soft, so I apologize. A lot of things happened. When I first started really understanding what happened and was really looking into the case and things, I was in high school, and I kind of questioned some things, and a lot of things didn't really add up to me based on things I heard at home or with my grandparents or, from attorneys or what have you. And so I had never really, I was just told that he did it, honestly. And that picture that showed of him, when he was arrested, that was the first picture I ever saw of who I thought killed my dad. So that was kind of weird to see, but it's totally different now. Anyway, what led to that was just a lot of confusion, and my family was obviously in pain, and we just went along thinking that he did it. And parole would come up here and there, we'd go and fight it, but there was never any evidence that proved anything. So going through years of my life, decades, I never really was confident that he did it. And the older I got, I started questioning things even more. And, so, which comes to my faith. And I've always been a believer, but as we all know, the devil's a believer in God. And, I didn't know really the difference. And I always struggled with my faith, playing the victim. Why me? And but my family and I didn't ever discuss anything. So I'm going to land the plane, I promise.
Take your time.
But then I struggled with depression and different things. And 5 years ago, I got sober and had a different perspective on my faith in God and what He can do for you, or what He does. And I just started learning different and looking at things differently. And again, I still thought I'd surrendered and what have you. But that July, I started talking with the DA's office, and they never really gave us a straight answer. And about a week before the exoneration, I went in there, and they told me he's gonna be exonerated. So I knew before I guess you did. Sorry. But it was confusing because, at that moment, so, okay, let me even back up. So July that year, I basically lost everything. My girlfriend, financially, work, everything had just gone apart. And then this book was coming out, and I was fighting with my family, saying, oh, how could this happen? And then me sitting here thinking, why is God doing this? And that's when I hit rock bottom and went. And I've been talking to Barb for probably 8-9 years at that time, and never really confessed or told her that I was questioning the ruling. I was pretty much stuck with the family line of we trust the justice system, and they got it right, so he's the one. And then when I'd lost everything, it was probably the first time I had really looked to God and said, okay, God, I'm going to have to trust you. And probably the second thing that I had to do was this. And I just said, this is happening for a reason. And I need to understand, I don't need to understand why, I just need to follow you. And then I found out that the exoneration date was my 50th birthday. So I was like, what a great birthday present, and But it was in the long run, obviously. But at that moment, I was still questioning things. But I was telling myself, I'm going to follow God. I'm going to follow the things that I believe He's doing in my life. And like Barb said, I texted her that day, and I said, I'm here. And before, she was asking if I was going, and I told her yes, but then I'd kind of waffle a little. And the one thing I did tell her is I wanted to see it from my own eyes and not read it in a magazine or in a newspaper or what have you, that I wanted to see it from my own eyes and see what happened. So.
What did you think hearing Ben's words about your family at his exoneration hearing in that speech that we just had a video of?
Well, now it's different than it was then. There was a lot of confusion in my head.
Yeah.
And it was great what he said. And at the moment, with all due respect to attorneys, and they're the biggest marketing campaign for their client. So they're going to, I was like, that's great that he's saying it. I thought it might have been prepared, and I realized later that it wasn't. So that was fine. It was great. And I'm not the one for attention, so even being up here is kind of hard.
Yeah.
But, I knew quickly that people knew who I was. And because I could hear the whispers or see people looking, and it's just a different crowd, and obviously. And I thought it was great, but it was me and my life and my family, so was kind of surreal in a sense. I never once thought I'd be sitting there.
Yeah.
That was, maybe my second time in a courtroom, but anyway.
So this is one of the many remarkable stories within an astonishing story, an overall story of Ben's life. And I just want to stress how quickly things started to move, right? We're in 2024, and then the two of you met in March 2025, just a year ago. How did that, for either of you, how did that happen? How did the meeting take place?
So, again, as I said, I was starting to follow God and signs, and just, there's no coincidences in God's world. And right after the book came out, I was meeting with a pastor for lunch, explaining to him everything, and we'd paid the tab and we were getting up and leaving, and he goes, "Oh, hey, by the way, I met a guy in the lobby at church. He's a member at our church. He works with exonerees. Would you want to meet him?" And I was just like, "Yeah, sure, that'd be neat." Didn't really think much of it. Kind of thought it was random, but didn't think anything of it. A couple weeks later, go by, and I serve every other Sunday as a greeter, and I get a text from the pastor saying, "He's here." I was like, "Who's here?" And I didn't even really remember that much.
You got to tell the part about Charles.
That's what I'm telling.
Oh, okay.
That's
Sorry,
where I'm going.
I thought you were telling the part about. Okay.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. You're telling me to land the plane. I get it.
You both take all the time you
He
need.
gets it all.
No, so I'm in there setting up for church, and the pastor texted me and said, "He's here." It's like, "What are you talking about?" So anyway, after a little bit, I finally go in there, and I start walking up to him, and I see him talking to this guy. And I kind of started just having a weird feeling, and because who he was talking to is not anything I expected. And I'm walking up, he's talking to Charles. Me and Charles are talking, and I don't remember everything, but I just remember him saying Ben Spencer's name, and it obviously got my attention because that's a name I've heard, basically most of my life. And then he looked at me and he goes, "Are you Jeff Young's son?" I'm like, "Who are you?" And he goes, I go, "Yes." He goes, "Ben and I have been praying for you for 20-something years." So when you showed the picture of his wedding, the guy in the background, his name's Charles Chapman, he goes to my church. And I live in Dallas, as I'm sure most of y'all know, it's not a very small place. And out of all the churches, of all the places, a groomsman in his wedding just happens to go to my church. And we got met through just by chance. And a week before that, when I was talking to the pastor, I was like, "How do you know God's talking to you?" So after we talked to Charles, and I didn't even know what was going on, really. We walked aside, and he goes, "If you can't hear God talking to you, everybody in church can hear it right now." So, of course, I'm on, this high, and all I wanted to do was meet Ben. And so that was in probably September, October of 24, right after the exoneration. And then it took some time, and we finally met a couple months later. But
Yeah, so starting with Ben and then back to Jay, what are your memories of that? What jumps out at you about that first meeting the two of you had?
It was a wonderful occasion. I mean, it was good to finally meet him and sit and talk to him, because we not only met, but we went out. He and I and Charles, we went out to lunch afterwards and had a good time. And so it was good to finally get a chance to meet him and get to hear from him, because my concern has always been for them, for his family, and what their feelings were. And I understood they had every right to feel the way they did, because I had been accused of the crime. Not only had I been accused of the crime, but I also been convicted of it. So they had every right to believe that I was the person responsible for what happened to his dad. And so he had every right to feel whatever he feels or felt. He had every right to that. And so for he and I to meet and to finally get to talk, and then him to tell me, "I don't think you had anything to do with it," that meant a lot to me. It was awesome.
How about you, Jay?
Do you want to tell them about leading up, how they didn't want you to meet? How they didn't, some of your family didn't want us to meet?
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm going to beat you up or something.
Well, yeah, I mean, for the life of me, I've never had any problem with confronting the people who may be opposed to me. And I use the word confront, that's not the proper word, or talking or having a conversation with people that may not agree with me. In fact, his grandfather started writing me in '95, and he kept telling me, all I want to know is the truth. All I want to know is the truth. And I kept telling him, all I want for you to know is the truth. And he and his grandfather wanted to come visit me, but we never met. He never got a chance to come visit me. And I later found out the reason he never came was because he had passed away, and I didn't know that. But to have an opportunity to sit down and to talk with Jay, that was awesome. But my family, they was always, even my wife, they were all opposed to me meeting anyone from the Young family. What if they do something to you? What if they hurt you? I said, I don't care. Well, I don't like the fact that they think you're guilty. I said, I don't care about that. I said, if they call me names, they insult me, they beat me up, I don't care. I say they have every right to feel the way they do because they believe that I committed this crime. So they're entitled to that. And if they hurt me, they take my life, oh well. That's how I felt, and that's how I still feel today.
So,
They sent me a picture right afterwards of that first meeting. Ben did, guess who I'm having lunch with? And there was Jay Young, right? I mean, whoa. But you said something that I found to be, you and I'm writing an article about this for The Atlantic, and Jay and I have talked extensively about this, and you said something that I found to be really wonderful. You said two things. One is that you had never felt so free, that you and Ben had kind of shared a prison experience in many ways, separate prisons. But you also said that Ben was starting a new life, and you could too.
yeah.
Can you just elaborate on that? I'm sorry.
No, that's good.
Well, yeah. So, so let me. I think you were asking about when we met. Let me touch on that and then get into what you were talking about. So, when I first met Ben, it was interesting because, you know, as a child, I remember my mom went to the trial and she would describe him, and one of the things she said was he just had these huge hands, and then Barb described, you know, what happened to my dad, and you know, so I've always thought of, you know, his hands, whatever, and I always thought I had decent sized hands for, you know, for my size. So then when I see him standing there, all I can think of is, my gosh, his hands are giant.
Can I talk on that? I don't mean to cut it off. But the reason why the hands, or his mother focusing on the hand, because that was a tactic that was used by the DA. He asked me to hold out my hands like this.
Big?
And what he told the jury was, imagine those hands around Jeffrey Young's neck. And that's what the jury remembers. And that's what his mother remembered.
So I remember that, right? I wasn't in the trial, but I was also standing there, you know, and in my head, I'm about to either shake the hands of the guy who killed my father, or I'm not. And at that moment, I felt God put his arms around me and just say, I got you, you know. Shook his hand. I mean, his hands probably wrapped around mine a couple times. We shook hands, and at that moment, I just felt all this peace and all the weight that I've been carrying for decades just leave. And I immediately started thinking of my family, saying, I wish they could feel this peace. And it was just I can't explain the joy that I felt, and just the release and the freedom that I felt. And so to what Barb was asking me about, you know, I struggled with alcohol till about 5 years ago, and even before that, you know, just fighting God's will and different things like that. I looked at it as, you know, I was in a prison without bars, and it was the same timing. I mean, today changed his life too, the death of my father, and from this day on, 39 years ago, he had bars around his prison, and mine was self-induced, really. And I got sober in December of 20. He was released in March of 21. So our lives just had these parallels. And I do remember telling Barb, the thing about the prisons, he just had bars, and then at that day, it was like we were both free, in a sense. He got to meet me. He'd always wanted to. I got to shake his hand. I did ask him. I just felt like I had to, but I just wanted to hear it from him. And then it turned into me apologizing and asking for his forgiveness for going to parole hearings, or even, at some point thinking he did do it. So, yeah, there you go.
So we'll begin taking questions in a moment. I wanted to have two sort of final reflections here. Barb, this is Civil Discourse Week at Baylor. What are your thoughts as a journalist, an investigative journalist, someone working in the media today? What are your thoughts about the relevance of this case, this conversation, for the topic of civil discourse?
I feel like this is a master class in civil discourse. And it's a particularly important story for right now in our culture, in our politics. So think about this. I know the miraculous nature of this reconciliation is something that I still am trying to get my head around. But when you look at these people, you have people on two sides. You have very, very different people. You have a white man and a black man. You have a businessman and an ex-con. You have a political conservative and a newly registered Democrat. You have one guy blaming the other guy for many years for his dad's murder. And yet they managed to get together. And I've thought a lot about this. How did they do this? How do these people who are on opposite sides of the sea manage to come together? And what I realize is, there are a lot of things, and I'm not an expert on forgiveness, but a lot of it came down to choice. Ben chose not to be angry or bitter in prison. He chose to always want to talk to the young family. He chose to live honorably, to hold out for the truth, to never cop to something that he didn't do. And Jay had a really hard time too, a lot of hard decisions. He decided, to stop drinking. He decided to take his faith seriously. He decided to consider the possibility that the other side might be right? How often do we do that? How often do we think, oh yeah, you know what, you may be right? Here was this murder, and he was thinking, he opened his mind to the idea that Ben might be innocent. He went to the exoneration. He said he wanted to meet Ben. These are all choices. And they sound normal, they sound easy to make. They're not. They're hard choices. Jay has sometimes said, thank me for my role. And I'm like, man, I didn't do the heavy lifting here. These guys did the heavy lifting. And so little by little, these choices to forgive, to listen to their better angels, that brought them together. And so if they can do it, we should be able to do this too.
That's wonderful. It makes us think about the sort of deep dispositions that make civil discourse possible and rich, and the coming together across the sort of divisions that you talked about and differences at the beginning. We're going to open it up to questions, but I want to ask Ben and Jay, you may be thinking, I hope I get asked this question, because I'd like to tell the Baylor students this is what they should be thinking about, or what they ought to derive from the story. Do either of you have suggestions? We got students here who could be lawyers or journalists, certainly ministers. All of them will be in civil society, maybe as part of juries in the future. What would you like to say to the students who are here, the Baylor students?
Particularly, I would just like to say that in life, we all have choices. And our choices are our own. We get to decide, we get to choose. And I would say with that, the only person that we can control is ourselves. And so, when you don't agree with someone, don't let that become a barrier. Let that become a bridge to connecting with one another, understanding one another. Because as we begin to understand one another, we can embrace one another, we can love one another, and we can forget about all the small things that seem to come between us, that seem to divide us, that seem to carry us the opposite way. Just stay committed to what is right, what is good. And as we seek the good in others, we find the good in ourselves. That's what I would leave.
I would start by saying recommit yourself to your higher power, to God daily. And, you know, as Barb said, be open to other people's opinions and ideas. You know, we live in a very divisive world today, and we're probably not even supposed to be friends. We're probably not even supposed to be sitting here, but we're good friends, and we're growing, and we talk all the time. And sure, there's people in my family that don't like it, but I've looked back and I toted the company, the family line, and I was miserable. And then I went on and thought what I was making a right decision for myself. With a lot of therapy, a lot of counsel, but I was leaning on God first, and it was one of the first times I really committed to that. And it's been an explosion of joy, and it's been the best couple years of my life lately. And you know, I can tell you right now, 39 years ago, I never thought I'd be sitting up here talking about my dad's death, but I never thought I'd be sitting with him. And one thing my mom always said was, you know, be nice to everybody. You never know who your boss is going to be. But that's the same thing as you never know who you're going to be sitting next to or in an elevator with. So, you know, listen to the other side, you know, appreciate each other. And, you know, it's turned into too much of a team sport, but we're all on the same team. We are. And it's okay to disagree, but just respect the others. So.
Thank you. I think we'll take questions now. And just to reiterate Elizabeth's point about questions rather than speeches.
I just want to say thank you all for coming and sharing. Really appreciate it. It was a very moving story. I have two questions for Ms. Hagerty. Are you also a person of faith, and how did that impact your investigation? And then Mr. Spencer, once you were released and exonerated completely, like, how is getting back into life and being out of life for 30 years, and obviously life continues to move on without you, how was that experience?
Thank you. Yes, I am a person of faith. I'm very serious about my faith. The way I acted out, I mean, the whole reason I did this book, this Ben's story, is because I was propelled by faith. What does the Lord require of you? To do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. We have certain things that we know God wants us to do. You know, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, welcome the visitors, or help the widows and the orphans, that kind of thing. We know this stuff. And so what I've tried to do in my own career is to have what I think of as a stripped down faith, which is that I just focus on the things I know God wants me to do. And I try to be Christ to. It may be that at many of these places I work, the Atlantic or NPR, I'm the only Christian they may know. That's not true in the Atlantic, but at NPR it was true. So how do I be Christ to them? And for me, it was treating them the way Christ would. and not shoving their faith down my throat. I know that's a pejorative way to say it, but I mean, I didn't talk about my faith, I just acted it out. And so yes, my faith has driven me in my story choices, my book choices, everything. It's also driven the way that I try to treat my colleagues in journalism.
And I would say, first of all, talk is cheap. And I said that because we can say that we have faith, but if we're not living it, it doesn't mean anything. So we can talk about believing all we want to until we start living it, start walking it out in life. It doesn't mean anything. But to answer your question, thank you for asking the question. I've just been ecstatic since I've been released. Of course, I didn't want to go to prison. However, I truly believe that it was an experience that I had to go through. I truly believe it is an experience that I needed to go through, because the person I am today is not the person I was in 1987. I wasn't a bad person. I just wasn't a person that really had this relationship with God that I have now. I knew about God. I had heard of him all my life, had been taught about him all my life, had went to church pretty much all my youth, but I didn't know Christ. That's just the truth of the matter. I didn't know him at all. It was through my incarceration that I began to develop a relationship that I never had, that I never thought I could have. And the beauty of it has been great. I mean, the way I treat people now is very different than the way I would have treated people back in 1987. I don't have any qualms with anybody. I may not agree with you, but I'm okay with that. You may not agree with me, and I'm okay with that. You know, we're still created by the one and only true God. So it's okay that we don't agree, just so long as I respect you and you respect me, and that's all that matters. We have to respect one another.
And can I jump in here, because he said something that was really profound. It was a day after his release. It's a Saturday morning, March 13th, right, 2021. And we're standing, it's a beautiful day. It's the first day he's been out in, 34 years, right? He's enjoying the sun. You could hear the lawnmowers, you could hear the birds. And I'm like, Ben, what is this like for you? And he said, you know what? It's like I should have been living this life all along, and now I am. And Ben is someone, and maybe you can just explain this a little bit, but you didn't have this rough transition that you hear about from prisoners. You just walked back into your life.
So to add to that, when I walked out of prison on March 12th, 2021, I was taken to a room, and I had on this jail uniform, which was a white jumper, I think it was. No, it was discolored. It was supposed to have been black and white, but it was kind of like green and gray.
It was gross.
Two-piece uniform, pants and shirt. And so anyway, I was ushered to this room, and I was told that your family brought you some clothes. Just go in there, put those clothes on, and take the jail clothes off, and just leave them in the room. So after I stripped off the uniform and put on this suit that my family had brought me, I walked out of this room, and it was like I walked back into my life. It was like waking up out of a coma or a bad dream, and it was like the 34 years just kind of evaporated, that they didn't exist anymore, and I just kind of walked back into my life. I embraced it as I embrace it today, so, yeah.
Other questions?
I'd like to add that
Yeah, please.
Ben's faith has been inspirational for me with his, being on our side while he was incarcerated. We got to hear things. We knew where he was most of the time, and the state would send us emails and different things. But he always committed and stayed on his faith. And at first when you hear that, you're like, okay, he could say whatever he wants, right? Sure, we've all heard and said different things about people in prison, and but he stuck with it, and just when I met him, I could tell that he was a man of God, and that his faith did get him through that. And then you think of the different stories in the Bible, and for the life of me, I cannot remember the guy who was in jail, who was Joseph. I mean, you know, and that's a story that we all read about in the Bible, and so his faith has been inspirational to me too.
My question, based off of what you just said, is how did your time in prison, if it did, change how you think about time? And like, also if it changed that at all in light of your faith and like the thought of the resurrection?
Wait a minute, I couldn't really hear you.
Oh, really? Repeat the question? Sorry, I'm kind of short. Okay. I said, based off of what you just said, how did your time in prison, if it did, change how you think about time?
Did it change the way I think about time? I guess it did. I mean, when it first started off, it was slow. And I think that once I got past the 10-year mark, it kind of speeded up a little bit. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm aging too fast in here. You got to slow down a little bit. I need to get out of prison first before I get too old. But, yeah, I mean, being locked up, to me, it was a challenge to be better, being who I believe I'm supposed to be. I want to talk about something right quick, and this has nothing to do with answer to your question. But there was a movement that came out while I was in prison, and it was the shortest living movement that I can remember. And probably you all are probably too young to remember it. But there was a movement, WWJD. Does anybody know what that means? What would Jesus do? The shortest living movement I know. And I began to question why. Well, I didn't question it. I understood why it lives so shortly. Because when we think about it, it's like looking in the mirror. We don't want to see ourselves. We certainly don't want to know what Jesus would do in the matter. The very people we tend to shun or stay away from, those are the very people that Jesus gravitated to. So we don't want to ask ourselves, what would Jesus do? Because the very people we run away from or we don't want to have anything to do with, those are the people Jesus would have gravitated to. And so when we ask ourselves, what would Jesus do? Then we're faced with the reality. Do we want to do? Really, do we really want to do what Jesus would have done? If we're truly believers, we want to do just that. And so I believe that's one of the reasons why it was such a short-lived movement, because no one really wanted to be like Christ, although we profess that we're Christians. I know that didn't answer your question, but doing time gave me a chance to open myself up to things that I never would have opened myself up to had I not been in prison.
I just want to say good evening to the panel, and thank you guys for being here. My question is for Mr. Spencer and Mr. Young. I know you stated that, loving your neighbor is the easiest part, but finding to have love for your enemy is something that you kind of found a little more challenging to do. Both of your guys' story I'm new to, religion and the Bible and everything, but the story of Job, how he did have love for God, but the devil tested him and said, hey, take everything away from him and see if he still, devotes his life to you. And he does. So I guess my question is, how long did it take for both of you guys to have that love for the enemy, quote unquote?
For me, it came. I don't know if I want to say it was easy, but I don't want to say it was very hard. It's a matter of choice. We choose to love or we choose to hate. I can choose to hate you, or I can choose to love you. I choose to love because to me it's far more better than hating, because when we hate people, we really do ourselves more damage than good, because we open ourselves up to all types of negative things, be it the negative that may come back to us, because of the situation. But you asked something, and I want to focus on
solitaire.
that.
Solitaire.
Yeah. She wanted me to talk about solitary, and but to me, I said this earlier. When I found myself in jail, accused of a crime that I did not commit, initially I did not know who my accusers were, other than the fact that they were neighbors. I didn't know who the neighbors were. I began to pray for them then. And then after I found out their names and knew that they were people who lived right down the street from me, people that I helped daily while I was in the streets, I continued to pray for them even more. And so what I tell people is, when you pray for people that you supposed to hate or whatever, I don't think we're supposed to hate anybody, but when we pray for people that we may perceive as enemies, it becomes easier to love them. And with that said, I would say this. We choose to either love or hate, And so, to me, to love you is far more better than me hating you, because I can do more good by loving you. That don't mean I have to agree with you. That don't mean you have to agree with me. But I can love and respect you as a human being, as a creation of God, as a brother, because we're all brothers. Despite our color, the differences our color, we're all brothers. We bleed the same. But there was something I wanted to say, and I guess I kind of forgot what it was. And I do that occasionally, so forgive me for that. But the beauty of it is we have to open ourselves up to it. And that's what I want to say. The scripture says this. Jesus says this. He said, love, you have heard that it had been said, love your neighbors. He said, but I say unto you to love your enemies. Now, I want to focus on that. He said, I say unto you, love your enemies. That's not a request he's making of us. That's a command. He said, love your enemies. Do good to those who despitefully use you and persecute. Now, these are people that we are designed, well, I'm not going to say we're designed, but we choose to hate people that persecute us or do evil against us. But Christ said we should love them. So if we're truly followers of Christ, what would we do? Back to the movement, WWJD. He would have loved them. In fact, the lady that was caught in adultery, he had every right to condemn her. He was the only perfect person there. But what did he do? He said, neither do I condemn thee. And that's something we do every day. We judge people every day for whatever reason. Right or wrong, we judge them. And that's not something Christ would do.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for the question. I was thrusted back into school and different things after my dad died, and I was the oldest. I have a brother and a sister, and I immediately felt like I was the oldest, or the man of the house. My mom was 33 and very young and struggling. But I didn't feel like I could afford to get angry. So I felt like I had to be the father of the house, in a sense. And obviously I didn't ask for that. And it did cause some problems. But to answer your question, I don't really believe that I've had many enemies, if any. Sure, like ex-girlfriends, boyfriend, all that stuff. But I've always been, the way my mom raised me, like I said earlier, was just to like everybody, basically, and be nice to everybody and respect everybody. And that worked for me. And I can't think of many times or any grudges that I had really held. And yes, I am divorced, so. But I've always believed, and I've always tried to talk to people that I disagreed with. And if there was ever any kind of confrontation or what have you, I'm always the one trying to stop it instead of instigate it. And that's just how I've always been. And I think that could be the older brother in me, but I've just never, I've seen people go through tough things, and I can see how that hurts the person who has the grudge, or who, just like in forgiveness, it hurts the person who holds on to that versus the other person. So. That's my best answer, I guess. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
And if I may, I'd like to add this. What's the saying? There's a question that a lot of people ask, and the question is this: why does bad things happen to good people? Or why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? First of all, God is not the author of the bad things that happen. We are. God just kind of allows us to be in control of our own lives, and that's why we have to understand, only person I can control is me. I can only control being. I can't control how you receive me, but I can control how I receive you. I can control how I respect you. I can't control how you respect me back. But my prayer is that we'd have a mutual respect for one another as believers, as all creations of God.
Hi, thank you all for being here. My question is for Mr. Spencer. So y'all were mentioning or talking a lot about these godly moments that were happening throughout the trial, but I also wanted to ask if you also had any particularly like God moments or godly moments that happened while you were in prison, or like with any inmates or things like that, or any things that you still resonate with or remember today.
Well, I would say I always tried to be an inspiration to others. I always tried to, and I don't like to preach to people. I like to try to live as an example because I believe that's more important. I mean, the way we live, people see us, and if the life that we're living doesn't line up with what we're talking about or what we're speaking, then others tend to, he's not all that, and they tend to shy away. And in instances like that, I think we tend to discourage people from becoming Christians because people feel like, well, I become a Christian, I can live that way as I am, I don't have to be a Christian to live like that. And so I just try to live and be an example to others, try to be an inspiration, a positive inspiration to others. But God was a big part of carrying, well, I'm not going to say he was the sufficient part of carrying me through my ordeal, my incarceration for 34 years. He sustained me. He kept me from getting hurt. And again, it called me to surrender to him. I mean, I could have did my own thing. I could have went my own way. I could have, I could still be in prison right today had I chose to go that way, because it's so easy to get caught up in prison, to get into things that you don't need to be involved in. But God was a big inspiration in my life, and just trying to allow the Holy Spirit to work in my life and use me in every way that he could. Yeah, that's what I tried to do.
Something I want to add on that is Ben's life after he's been out, since I've known him, he has every reason to be angry. Every reason to be angry. And people wouldn't blame him, right? But he's not. And his wife's not. And they're just lovely people. And they didn't ask for this, right? And, but they're, I just call them lovely people all the time. And they're doing what they're giving back, and they don't want people to be angry, like they could be, and that says a lot about them as well. And that's, the more I'm with them, the more I'm confident in my decision, and I just wish my family, a lot of people in my family or others would just kind of, I'm not saying that they think, we've talked about this, but I can see the pain that they're holding on. They're holding on to the past, and they're not giving, their faith a chance. And but they're incredible people. So,
Thank you.
Thank y'all for being here. It's okay. I'll stand up my tippy toes.
turn it down.
Oh,
There you go.
there we go. So you guys both spoke a lot about trust. Mr. Spencer trust in the system that the truth would come out, and Mr. Young trust in that the system convicted the right person. Did you guys ever doubt the system? And if so, did it ever affect how you looked at your faith?
I would say yes. I did doubt the system because, and the reason I doubted the system because, again, it's controlled by man. And, you know, people ask me about the justice system. Is it broken? No, it's not broken. We're the contributing factor in the judicial system that causes it not to function the way it does or should, because for a jury, we may go in with preconceived ideas, and what the prosecutor presented may sound true, doesn't mean that it is true, but it may sound true, and we just kind of go along with it as opposed to question it. And unfortunately, most jurors who wind up on a jury trial, from the outset, they believe that the person that's sitting at the end of the defendant table is guilty. Why else would the police arrest him if he didn't commit a crime? So already in their minds, the preconceived ideal is he's guilty. And so they make a verdict based on the preconceived idea as opposed to what the evidence points out.
So I'm going to disagree with him on one thing. The part where he said most juries are thinking that. I was called to jury a couple weeks ago, and the last thing I wanted to do was be there. So that's probably the first thing they're thinking is, why am I here? No, but sure, you doubt anybody. You doubt anything. I've always said I believe in the justice system. It's not perfect, and it never will be. And we're, just like Ben was saying, we're not perfect, and we never will be. I mean, it is the greatest system that the world's known. And it does have its flaws just like everything. And unfortunately, we have to trust it. And if you go through everything, just like I was talking about Ben and Deb, is if you just have anger and lack of trust, you're just going to be an angry person. And, you know, bad things happen to good people, and good things happen to bad people. And it's just the way it is, and that's what should prompt people to have faith. That God, you know, I don't know what you're doing, but you're doing. And that's the answer, in my opinion. So,
Thank you, guys.
First of all, thank you for coming out. Very powerful message. So I have two questions. My first one's a little more lighthearted to Ben. So from my knowledge, prison food isn't the best. So I was wondering, when you're incarcerated, what food did you miss eating the most from the outside world?
All of it. I mean, you stated a known fact. Prison food is not good. In fact, I think every year it gets worse, because what offenders face every year is every time there's a budget cut, it affects inmates more than anybody. I mean, like the unit I was on, officers eat for free, but if you go into their chow hall, their food is much better than what the inmates are eating. And so, like when you go through the line in the chow hall, inmates get only one serving of main course. That's it. Now, vegetables, you might get 1 or 2 scoops of it, but the main course, which is the protein, the meat, the chicken, the beef, whatever, you only get 1 piece. But if you go in the officers' mess hall, they can have as much as they want, and they don't pay for their meals. And so, but yeah, the food is bad. It's not worth breaking down the bars and the fences trying to get in there to get it, because it's not worth it.
Well, I guess like a quick follow-up, what was the first thing that you ate when you came out?
I wanted to eat a steak. I really can't remember right off.
It was at your house.
Yeah, no, we didn't eat. No, we didn't.
Okay, sorry.
By the time we got to the house, we did. What did we have?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we did have Babe's chicken. Yeah, we had. I wanted a steak. That was the first meal I wanted. Well, it depended on what time I got out, because when I went to prison, I liked Church's chicken. And I said if I got out around noontime, I wanted to eat Church's chicken. But if I got out in the evening, I wanted to eat steak. However, by the time we got home by the time we made it to the house, everybody was at our house. The media, friends, people wanted to hear about the case. Oh, it was awesome. But yeah, I wanted to be a steak. I think we had chicken. I think it was baked chicken. Yeah.
And then
So
my
your
second
serious question is going to be about dessert?
Yeah, that was actually my follow-up. But my second question is for the both of you guys. Jay, you talked about the parallels in your guys' life, and one of those being the development of your personal relationship with Christ. So I guess a question for both of you guys is, when you were through that journey, like what did Jesus' voice sound like? What was his warmth like? Jay, you mentioned, his arms wrapped around you when you were about to shake Ben's hand. So I guess kind of put it all together, how did Jesus present his identity to you, and what was that like for you?
I would say this. I can't say how Jesus presented himself to anyone else. However, the way Christ presented himself to me was through the scripture. Before I found myself arrested for this crime, I had never read the Bible. I could quote a few scriptures. I had heard the Bible taught and preached all my youth, but I had never read the Bible for myself. So to have an opportunity, that's what 34 years of incarceration provided for me, an opportunity of time to read an impossible to read book. Because before I went to prison, I thought the Bible was impossible to read. I thought it was too long, too many words to read. But when I found myself incarcerated, I had nothing but time, and I started to read the Bible. And what I found is not only is the Bible not impossible to read, but it's a joy to read. And so I read it. I can't even count the many times I read it, because I went through it so many times, because it was that beautiful to me, to read the stories of Christ, or to read the Old Testament, the patriarchs and all those, and what they did, and what they went through, And so for me, I want to kind of throw this out there. For me, the suffering that I went through was nothing compared to what Christ went through. And so when I first began this journey, when I first found myself incarcerated, the question I would ask myself every day was, why is this happening to me? And as time went on and I was incarcerated longer and longer, the question stopped being why, and the question began, why not me? Who am I? Am I more special than Christ, that I can't suffer, that I can't go through something? No, by no means. And so that's how he spoke to me. I looked at what he went through for my sake, and I began to wonder, who am I that I can't go through something, that I can't suffer, because he suffered for my sake. So that's how he spoke to me, through my suffering.
For me, thanks for the question. For me, I've come to realize that Christ has been talking to me since I can remember. I don't remember much since before my dad died, but looking back, he was speaking to me through different trials, and instead of me embracing those trials, I would try to resist them and fight them. And I always thought that God would speak to me, and whatever I wanted would come to me, right? Get me out of this situation. We've all had those foxhole prayers. I'll never do this again, I promise, right? And it took me years to understand that if I would have embraced those trials differently, maybe the following trials wouldn't have happened. But God was training me, and as he does for all of us, the trials are learning to learn. And once you have faith, and I had a really hard time trusting God. I thought he hated me, honestly. And because I didn't know anybody else whose dad was murdered, right? So I was in a world of my own. And it took me 30-something years to understand. Now I finally see a purpose in my dad's death, if that makes sense. And that's a hard thing for my family to hear, unfortunately. But for me, it's great. Maybe lack of better words, but it's just been great to look back. I was talking to my girlfriend driving up here, just saying I can look back and see all the different highs and lows that's led up to this day, and I'm as happy as I've ever been. And I could have done a lot of different things, and so yeah. Long answer to your question, I think he's been talking to me for a long time, and I never knew. I always expected some beaming voice or what have you, but it was through different actions and different things, and him letting things happen to me to make me more mature. And everybody goes through that. It's just a matter of accepting.
If I may, can I share something with y'all right quick before I know we're running out of time, but I want to share this with you, and you can carry it with you or you can leave it here. And that is, God does not make us do anything. He asks us to do his will. He's not going to force us to do it. So when people do you wrong, it's not God forcing them to do it or causing them to do it. It's because they chose to do it. Just like he's not going to force me to do anything, he's not going to force anyone else to do anything. We either surrender ourselves to his will or we don't. We reject it.
Well, I can't think of a better thing to end on than thinking about the suffering of Christ as we get ready. Not only at Civil Discourse Week, but next week is Holy Week. So let's thank our panelists for a wonderful conversation. It's great having y'all.